This is Tell Me Your Story, a special edition for the entire year of 2025. That's our hope, our dream, our plan, and I am joined today, I'm very excited about this series, by the author of Real Impact, Daily Inspirations. Had Dennis Henson on our program in 2024 near the latter end and had a great time talking about his book, the inspiration, the encouragement, and all of those good things that help to uplift us. And first of all, Dennis, thank you so much for being a part of this series of programs called Real Impact, where we're going to dive into each week a different story and the message that it brings, the hope, the inspiration, etc., to help to uplift people as we look at a brand new year that always seems to give us that sense, most of us, a sense of optimism. Thanks for being here to provide that.
Well, thank you for having me, Richard. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm very excited about it.
Well, I'll tell you, I am excited about it too. And what we're going to do is we're going to start out in this first segment of the program talking about, obviously, we've got three segments we're going to put to our listeners. We have the introduction of the book, Real Impact, as well as how to read the book. We're going to talk about that. And then there's a magic formula. So let's jump right into the introduction.
You're listening to Real Impact, Daily Inspiration, written by Dennis J. Henson, narrated by Tom Gallagher. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Benjamin Franklin. If a man empties his purse into his head, no one can take it from him. Benjamin Franklin. Form the habit of reading every day. Dennis J. Henson. Dedication. This book is dedicated to my mentors, without whose guidance and encouragement I could not have survived in the world of business. These kind and generous individuals have had a real impact on my life and on the lives of everyone they touched. J. Bernie Bishop, High School Band Director, Center, Alabama. D.D. Black, Instructor of the University of Alabama Music Camp. Dr. David L. Waters, Director of Bands, Jacksonville State University, Alabama. Jack McConaughey and Tom Hendricks, executives at Henco, Inc., Selmer, Tennessee. Charles G. Bowden, President, B&B Beverage, Athens, Georgia. And the many great authors who poured their very souls into the books referenced in these pages, especially Napoleon Hill, Og Mandino, Zig Ziglar, and Jim Rohn.
Dennis, give us a little more, if you can, on this book and how it came to be. We heard the introduction, but it's always good to hear it from the author's mouth and voice, if you will.
Well, it briefly mentioned that I was on a podcast, and on that podcast, the host asked, "Why are your students so successful? What makes the difference?" And I said, well, I have them change their habits. If people will change their habits to success habits, then they'll be successful. Then the host said, well, what's the number one habit? What habit would change people's lives the quickest? And of course, I said, well, if they form the habit of reading something positive every day that moves them toward their ultimate goal, it will have a tremendous impact on their future. So after the podcast, I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if someone came up with an easy way to form that habit? If there were a tool or an app or a book. And then that's when I decided I can do this. I've been collecting books for almost 50 years. I read a lot more books than the ones on the list. I only kept a list of the books that really had they inspired me. They made a change. And so I captured those and kept them, which wasn't an easy task. I also did the same with poems and then quotes. And then after I started teaching real estate investing back in 2005, part of the training was to try to inspire. I wanted to inspire my students to believe that what they were doing would work and to go out and do the necessary. You have to have your mind right in order to become successful anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking for stories of people who struggled. And the first story I found, I remember I heard the story, I read the story, and I thought, I've got to go back and find that. When I started the book, I didn't have it written. I didn't have the story written, but I knew the essence of it. And so I did a search on Google and YouTube, and I found it in there were several different renditions of it. So I listened to all of them. I wrote them all out, and I carefully put all the pieces together. And we're going to cover that in one of our future meetings. I think that's really a great start. And the name of the book, the name of the story is A Rocky Start. So it's the first story in the book. So it really was the first story that I wrote, and it's really the first story in the book.
Does it seem as though the people that you have met over the years, as well as through the stories that you share in this particular edition of Real Impact, and I know there are a lot more to come, I'm sure, that's kind of the way it seems to happen for a lot of folks, that their success was usually a rocky start. One in particular I think of, and I'm not sure if this is one of the stories, of Edison, who developed the light bulb. And he had over 900 ways, as I like to look at it, where the light bulb didn't work. They weren't failures, but certainly it must have been a struggle to figure out, okay, well, horsehair didn't work, and this didn't work, and that, and I mean, 900 so far, 901, and so on, until one day, boom, the light went on, both literally and figuratively. So have you seen that sort of as a pattern? It's not that it has to be that way, but from these stories, it seems like that does seem to be the case.
It is, and that's the seventh secret of success is persistence. And in my book, The Seven Secrets of Success, I mentioned Edison, and I mentioned the story that you're telling, where during that day, the media of the day was newspapers. There was nothing, there wasn't TV, there wasn't radio at the time. The newspaper, one of the reporters said, they asked him about all of his failures. What about all the failures of trying to create this light bulb? And he looked at him and he said, I haven't had any failures. I just know 900 ways that don't work. That was his attitude. They're not failures. And in story after story in this book, the Hershey story, he failed many, many times trying to create milk chocolate. It took him years. And then Henry Ford, when he told his engineers that he wanted to create an internal combustion engine, they all told him it couldn't be done. They said, no, you're crazy. No, we can't make an 8-cylinder engine that's internally, no, it won't work. And so after a year, he met with them again. And every one of them said, it was unanimous, this will not work. It can't be done. And he said, go do it anyway. And if you don't, I'll find some engineers that will. And so they did. So persistence is one of the 7 secrets that flows through the book. You'll see it in every single story. I think probably Disney is the one that impresses me the most, because the poor guy, he kept bringing people into his life that were dishonest.
Yeah.
They would steal everything he had. They'd take advantage of him. And the story in the book on when Mickey Mouse was born, it was like a real birth, because he had just gone through a terrible, he had lost all of his characters. Someone had hired all of his cartoonists. The only thing he had left was his wife and his brother and one cartoonist. And he had no characters. They had all been stolen. And he was on a train coming back from New York to California. and he was just feeling terrible. So he took a tablet and he was trying to draw a new character. He tried a cat, but there was already too many cartoon cats. He did a possum, he did a goat, he did a pig, he did all of these. And finally, the train just rocked him to sleep. And the train jolted and woke him up and made him remember an incident that he'd had with a mouse back years before. And he looked to his wife and he said, "I've got the new character." And she said, "What? What?" And he said, "It's Mortimer Mouse." And she said, "What? That's a terrible name. That's, people will not like that." He said, "What do you think?" She said, "How about Mickey?" And he thought for a second and yeah. So instead of going back to work to tell his brother we've lost everything and being really low and down, he went into the studio, he was all excited, and he told his brother, "We have got something that's better than ever before." And it was, because he believed it was. So over and over again, the poor guy started with nothing. He almost died twice in the story. So each of the stories has the 7 secrets. And whoever you bring up, in fact, the Edison story is really much, much more complicated. And Edison wanted to be an inventor, and he was a pretty successful inventor. He had a big lab. You may not know this, but everything he had was in his laboratory. But back then, everything was the buildings were wooden. So there was a spark in the laboratory that caused a fire, and everything he had, he was 60, I think 63 or 60. He was in his mid-60s. Everything was destroyed. There was nothing left. All of his experiments, everything was gone. And he saw his wife walking up and he said, "Honey, come look. Look at this beautiful fire. You'll never see anything that compares with this again." That was his attitude. And so the next day he started to rebuild. Everything that we know of from Edison happened after that fire. So he was resilient. He was resilient. And I'm glad you mentioned him, because that's one of the better stories in the second book.
Well, we'll be getting into that one down the road too, as well. It is also a side note that I'm sure one of the stories does address, and that is I'm going to say the importance of the spouse. In most cases, in some of these stories, the wife or mother or sister had an influence on the person, the man who was trying to accomplish something. And I have to do the same thing with my book. For example, my book wouldn't even exist if it weren't for my second wife and what she went through that spurred me to do what I did to eventually write the book. So I have to give a credit, obviously, more than half to her. Very appreciative. So that's something we'll talk about as we continue on. We're talking with Dennis Henson. He is the author of a book we are going to be diving into each week here on the program, Tell Me Your Story, called Real Impact, Daily Inspiration. And we'll be talking more about that as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and this is Tell Me Your Story. We are talking right now with Dennis Henson. He's the author of a Real Impact. That's the title of the book. It's in paperback. It's what do you think, about an inch thick, maybe something like that. But it's fun reading. I've actually got it on Audible, and it's a wonderful thing. I've actually been listening to it in my car. And there it is right there, folks. And we hope that you'll get a copy of it as well. DennisHenson.com is the website, and we encourage you to go there. It's available on Amazon and all the other locations. Go ahead, Dennis.
It's realimpactbook.com.
Realimpactbook.com is the website you want to go to. We'll get you DennisHenson.com eventually, okay?
I have that too. but
I understand. But folks can get a copy. I have to tell you that the narrator that they selected for the Audible he does a great job. He really does. I'm very impressed with that particular voice. It's very powerful and very inspiring because of the way that he does present it. I want to jump into you don't often hear about this at the beginning of most books, but you have a chapter or a section right at the front that talks to us about how to read Real Impact, and we're going to take a listen to that narration, if you will, here on Tell Me Your Story.
How to use this book. When a new student comes to me for instruction and guidance, the first thing on their mind is, what can you do to help me succeed quickly? Understanding this early in their training, I teach them, changing your habits will have a real impact on your future. I then lay out a plan for them to start doing the right things repeatedly until they become routine parts of their lives. Of course, some habits are more significant than others. Once, during an interview, I was asked, if you had to name the one thing that's had the greatest impact on your students, what would it be? I thought for a second and said, form the habit of reading the right things every day. The next question was, what do you mean by the right things? Well, that depends. Let me explain. Suppose you want to become a medical doctor. In that case, you should read things about the practice of medicine. But if you want to become a real estate investor, read real estate-related materials. It's also important to read about other areas of life: education, health, relationships, religion, success, money, etc. After that interview, I wondered, what would I suggest should be read first? Wouldn't it be great if there was a book? And like a bolt out of the blue, it hit me. That's it. I'll write a book to help people start the habit of reading daily. I already have a list of great books that can easily be placed in priority order. Then I remembered my recollection of quotes and motivational stories. As more things came to mind, I got excited and made the book a project. After that, things seemed to fall into place until one day, Real Impact became a reality. Before giving you the formula to form the reading habit, let me explain 3 things. First, this book wasn't intended to be read from cover to cover, but rather a little at a time. It should be sipped like fine wine and consumed in combination with other good books for reading in more extended time slots. Second, the quantity of the reading is not as important as the quality. So the 80-20 principle should be used to help focus on reading the things offering the most significant benefit. In other words, focus on getting 20% of the things on your list completed that are most important first. Then accomplish the other 80%. Make sure reading falls in the top 20%. Third, anyone's life will change for the better by merely forming the habit of reading the right things daily. Keep in mind that developing new habit requires a strong commitment. Here's the magic formula. 1. Immediately start a new reading habit. Each day, read about subjects that will help you attain your goal and achieve your dreams. 2. Schedule and set aside a time for daily reading. 3. Once you start, never let a day go by without putting something positive into your mind. 4. Go to the chapter on life-changing books. Acquire the top book on that list and keep it next to this book. Read from it when you have larger blocks of time. 5. Put the 2 books in a conspicuous location where you can't miss seeing them, and be sure to pack them when you travel. 6. Should you begin to slide, find a support person to hold you accountable. 7. Go back to the life-changing books list and order or purchase the next book. Always order 1 or 2 books ahead to avoid interruptions. Do not be fooled by the simplicity of this formula. Used properly, it's like rubbing Aladdin's lamp and can be the open sesame to your fondest dreams. You may be thinking, I'm already so busy, I don't have time to read every day for the rest of my life. Well, you're not alone. Everybody's busy. Some days it will be challenging to find time to read. That is the beauty of Real Impact. It was written for active people. The first chapters are short stories that can be read in several minutes, followed by poems and quotes that will only take minutes or even seconds to read. As I said before, what matters is not the quantity, but the quality of the reading. Anyone can fit in a quote or two each day, and these quotes aren't only powerful, they're also thought-provoking. If you want a happier, more successful life, don't miss this opportunity to change your trajectory. Author's note. Many artistic liberties were taken while writing these stories, so do not expect the material to be completely factual. However, most of the short stories are based on actual events, and an effort was made to verify the facts. The material in this book was compiled from interviews, notes, my memory, and public information found on Google and YouTube. Reading is essential for those who seek to rise above the ordinary. Jim Rohn. Focus on your dream and never quit. It's always too soon to quit. Rudy Rudiger.
Dennis, tell us a little bit about this particular section and why you felt it was necessary to have so to speak, an instruction manual of sorts on how to read your book.
Well, Richard, this book was not written to be read from cover to cover. It was written to be read a little at a time and to help form the habit of daily reading, to help people change their lives and be able to move forward and stay motivated. So I thought it was necessary to explain in the beginning of the book how to use it, because it's not just a book, it's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that's intended for a certain purpose. And if you use it the way it was intended, this book will turn into hundreds of other books. It'll turn into a happy life of reading, habit of daily reading of things that keep you motivated and encouraged and moving toward your goal. You know, people's minds move into 1,000 different directions. And if you don't have a rudder on your boat, you're going to go into a lot of different directions. But if you know where you want to go and you read about it every single day, it keeps you moving in the direction of your ultimate goal. If you don't have that habit, you may wake up one day and think, oh, I really wanted to do this, but I got sidetracked.
Mm-hmm.
So it keeps you from being sidetracked. Plus, there's a lot to be said about contemplating what you've read. If you just pick a book up and read it with no contemplation, you probably had an enjoyable experience,
Mm-hmm.
but it really didn't mean much to you. So back in the 3rd or 4th century, a group of monks got together and said, we want to get into the scriptures more deeply. This is called Lectio Divina. And they came up with a plan where they would read a scripture, then they would imagine themselves as part of the scripture. Then they would read it again out loud, and then they would spend the next minutes or hours or however long contemplating that scripture. Now, that may be what they do for an entire day, just one scripture. But by doing it that way, the scriptures meant so much more. Then in about 200 years later, that was the sacred part of Lectio Divina. A couple of hundred years later, a secular part came in, and you do it the same way. You're just not reading the scriptures. So that really fits very well with this book. You read until something really touches you. Now, these stories are filled with the 7 secrets. Right before the break, you mentioned the 6th secret. You're going taking them from the end to the first. Seventh secret is persistence. The 6th secret is forming great alliances. You were talking about how important your wife was to
Mm-hmm.
being able to complete your book. Well, it's the same way with all of your alliances in business. The better the people, well, let's say if you're friends with 5 people, your income is probably going to average about the same as those 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can bring in more and more and better successful people, you become more and better, a better success yourself because of the relationship with them. So that's why forming great alliances is so important.
Well, we're going to talk, of course, we're going to listen all to in our next segment in regards to the magic formula and talk about that. But I have to tell you, I'll give you my personal experience of your book. And of course, I did get it in the Audible form, and I've been listening to it in the car. And at a very early point in the listening, it might have been in the first or second story, I felt a certain level of responsibility to you, so to speak, and to myself, to adhere to that first piece of information in the introduction about reading something every day, reading something that's uplifting, something that's encouraging, something that teaches you about success. And so it's like, okay, sometimes I will get close to the end of my day going, did I can't remember. Did I read something today? Okay, I'm better. All right. At the very least, I need to throw Dennis' book into the phone and put my earbud in and listen to a chapter. At the very least, I need to do that much, And I have to tell you that when you talk about these different stories, the short stories that are in your book, I think even about some of the longer books that I have listened to, and the most recent one, of course, that I've shared with you is one that was a dramatization. It was like listening to radio theater for a lot of folks. Hey, Google it and you'll find out what that's all about. I used to produce radio theater. Oh my God, it was so much fun. And I would listen to this book that was dramatized, and when I got to the end of it, I was actually a little dejected. Had nothing to do with the contents of the book or the dramatization. It had to do with the fact that, oh, I finished it. Now what? I miss those people that I miss the characters. And we're talking about, these were multiple, there wasn't a person doing all the voices. These were different people who were, I mean, I don't know how, 10 or 15 or 20 different people. And I got comfortable with them. I got familiar with them. They were like family. Well, and the same thing happens even when listening to Real Impact, and I'm listening to the narrator, and he's the reader. And by the way, as a kid growing up, I used to listen to books all the time because being legally blind, I was listening to recorded books for recreation as well as when I was in school for textbooks. And you just feel like this person, no, don't go away, don't finish, read more because I love listening to you. For example, my version of the autobiography of a yogi, I have that on my phone, but I have the version not with Ben Kingsley, which is a beautiful version, don't get me wrong, but it's the version that I listened to as a kid growing up in the 70s, and it was recorded in 1972 by a man who did a most amazing job with it. He didn't necessarily do different voices, but you knew who he was talking, what person was speaking, because he did a very good job of defining it. And I have to listen to that version because this person is a part of my life now, inseparable. And the stories that you have in your book, Real Impact, I think they come across in the same way. And the narrator or the reader, that's what I said earlier, did a great job of doing that. And we're going to talk about the magic formula here in a moment. I will let you elaborate on what I had to say in just a moment, but I want to remind you, you are listening to a very special series of programs that are going to continue on through 2025 called Real Impact here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome back to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan along with Dennis Henson. He's the author of Real Impact. RealImpactBook.com is the website. Please go there. Get yourself whatever version you prefer. I personally like the Audible, and read the stories. You know what? If you've got the ability to have it always in your car, you have the computerized stuff and all that good stuff. Have it ready to rock and roll as soon as you turn that engine over and you're I guarantee you, you're going to be inspired, uplifted. I will say, and I don't recall the story off the top of my hand, top of the head, but there were two stories. One that really touched me to where I thought I was going to have a little tear running down my cheek. There was another story that told the story of an individual, and I thought, "Nah, I don't want to have anything to do with this guy. I don't know why Dennis put that. This guy's got so much baggage. And then I realized, you know what? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. The stories are still important, regardless of how you feel about the person who is being spoken about. I mean, a lot of folks won't like the Rocky start, the Rocky story with Sylvester Stallone because they don't think that he's all that intelligent. I mean, the comedic portrayals of the poor guy. But look how successful he is today. I mean, my goodness, he's come a long way from the story of Rocky. But you created, or you have a magic formula that we are going to take a quick listen to, and then I'm going to have you to talk a little bit about it as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story.
Here is the magic formula. Number 1, immediately start a new reading habit. Each day, read about subjects that will help you attain your goals and achieve your dreams. 2, schedule and set aside a time for daily reading. 3, once you start, never let a day go by without putting something positive into your mind. 4, go to the chapter on life-changing books. Acquire the top book on that list and keep it next to this book. Read from it when you have larger blocks of time. Number 5, put the 2 books in a conspicuous location where you can't miss seeing them, and be sure to pack them when you travel. 6, should you begin to slide, find a support person to hold you accountable. 7, go back to the life-changing books list and order or purchase the next book. Always order 1 or 2 books ahead to avoid interruptions. Do not be fooled by the simplicity of this formula. Used properly, it's like rubbing Aladdin's lamp and can be the open sesame to your fondest dreams. You may be thinking, I'm already so busy, I don't have time to read every day for the rest of my life. Well, you're not alone. Everybody is busy. Some days it will be challenging to find time to read. That's the beauty of Real Impact. It was written for active people. The first chapters are short stories that can be read in several minutes, followed by poems and quotes that will only take minutes or even seconds to read. As I said before, what matters is not the quantity, but the quality of the reading. Anyone can fit in a quote or 2 each day, and these quotes aren't only powerful, they're also thought-provoking. And if you want a happier, more successful life, don't miss the opportunity to change your trajectory.
So let's dive into the magic formula. How'd you come up with this formula?
Well, it just made sense. You know, I was anxious for people to use the book as it was intended. I had seen with my students what could happen. You know, as the students came in, I gave them a list of books to read. And as an assignment, they had to read this, had to listen to this. And then when they came back for their next lesson, we were going to discuss it. So they couldn't, you know, they were going to have to read it. And I was a pretty stern instructor. I told them when they signed up for my coaching that I was going to be their coach and not their friend. I was going to kick them in the butt, make sure that they did what they should do. And if they came in and they hadn't done their numbers or done their homework, I was not going to be easy on them because they were paying me a lot of money and I wanted them to experience some success. And if they didn't, it was going to be my fault. So I didn't hesitate to push them extremely hard. And so when I was putting this together, I was thinking of the super successful, I mean, these students, I saw a thing this morning about coaches, about these, if you go to the Olympics and you see somebody win a gold medal, do you know their coach's name? No. But without that coach, there's a really good chance that they wouldn't have, reached the gold level. Well, that's kind of the way it is with coaches. You don't have to be the best to be a great coach. You just have to be a great coach. And so what I tried to do over the years that I was coaching was to find out the techniques that really, really worked. And I know that this works. And the very first part of the book, which we haven't mentioned and we're probably not going to cover, is testimonials from my students. It's page after page of students saying, my goodness, this guy changed my life. Listen to what he says. It really does work. And so I thought with that kind of a testimonial, I better put something in there that worked. And I sincerely believe that it really is a magic formula, that if you follow it exactly, you're going to be planting seeds in your mind, and nature's going to take over, and those seeds are going to bloom into thousands or hundreds of thousands of seeds. And it's really kind of a law of nature. It's not maybe it will happen. It will happen. I've seen it over and over again.
It's interesting, too, that one of the principles that I speak about on this program quite often is that words have power. And when you speak about the testimonials, and I would have to state here for the benefit of some of our listeners that when you talk about these testimonials and they speak about you, the individual who has impacted these folks' lives, it is not coming at all from any egotistical position. It is a recognition, just as I would say the same, if I could list the thousands of people who have had an influence on my life, that I would be saying, look, I'm beholden to these people. And you too are beholden to these students because they have made you a better teacher, a better coach, et cetera, et cetera. And the evidence is those testimonials. And that speaks very highly of the reason why folks need to get a copy of the book, Real Impact. And we're going to continue talking more about that. Go to realimpactbook.com, get your copy, and we will be back in just a moment here on Tell Me Your Story. We are back here with Dennis Henson. He's the author of Real Impact. Realimpactbook.com is the website. Please get your copy and enjoy it. Read it over and over again. In these last couple of segments here, I want to touch upon, and I guarantee you we will have a section on those testimonials. Don't you fret about that at all, because I want people to know that this is what can happen to an individual such as Dennis when you put yourself out there and you take on, I don't want to say necessarily my philosophy, but this is one of my philosophies or part of it. When I hook up with someone to take on a project, my goal is not to be successful. And you'd think, well, Richard, that's counterproductive. No, it's not. My goal is to make the person that I am working on the project with successful, because if they're successful, then I'm successful. And that's what you're talking about here, Dennis. But you have a couple of other sections of this book. Actually, there are 3 or 4 of them. One is you've got a section with poetry. You have a section of quotes. You also have a section on life-changing books and a bibliography, which obviously references many of the stories and quotes and so forth that are listed throughout the book. Let's start here with, and I think this is fabulous. You might as you could. It's like an extension of the bibliography, and that is the life-changing books. For me, Paramahansa Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi, Og Mandino's Greatest Miracle in the World, and that's just 2 of many. So talk to us about that section and how many books are in that section? Do you know offhand?
There's probably 100. I didn't count them. I mean, there's a lot because I started in 1975, and every time I heard of or read a book that I felt would help me move forward, I would read it, and if it did help, it went on the list, and if it didn't go on the list. So when I decided to do this, I thought, They need to be in priority order because if someone only reads the first one or two, it will have the most impact. So they are. The last one, let's say there's 150 books. The last book on that list is almost as good as the first one,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not quite. So it was a difficult task to prioritize these, but it was fun. And I think when I first started reading, I started with a large company and they gave me three books. They gave me Think and Grow Rich, Success, the Glenn Bland Method, and The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. And after I read those books, I was on fire. I mean, you better get out of my way because I'm going to become successful and I'm going to make a lot of money. And I did. I made so much money. Having grown up, my father was a disabled veteran, so we lived on, 60% of a veteran's pension, which was not very much money.
Mm-hmm.
And we grew our own. I worked in the garden. We grew our own food. He would buy a pack of shotgun shells, and that would last him the entire winter, and would eat from what came from those shells. We had
Mm-hmm.
squirrels and rabbits, and so to me, being poor was normal. I mean, I didn't feel poor. I didn't even realize I was until I got out in the world and saw, wow, there's people that go eat at restaurants. There's a lot of things out here I didn't know about. So being 25, 26 years old and having the opportunity to just have big checks coming. I mean, more money than I'd ever imagined coming in. I bought a house. I bought a Mercedes Benz. Back then, that was a big deal. You had a Mercedes Benz, you were up, in the upper class. And I got married. I had all the toys that anyone would ever want to have. And I had a desire to read more books because I wanted that motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember Psycho-Cybernetics was one of the books I read.
Oh my heavens, yes.
Yeah, and well, let's see. I'm trying to think of some of them. There were just so many of them, but all of the Og Mandino books, I just loved Og Mandino's books, but I loved the way he wrote. So when I started writing this book, I found, I mean, I got a big library. I wish I could turn the camera around. I have lots and lots and lots of books. So I got The Greatest Salesman in the World, and I read it again, and a tear came to my eye in a certain section, and I thought, that's what I want to do. You mentioned it yourself. You read the book and a tear came to your eye. I want to write a book that's going to reach into people's soul, grab their heartstring, and squeeze a tear out of their eye.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny you mentioned that. Everybody I talk to that has read the book, I always ask them, well, was there any part where it really got emotional? And oh yeah. And I can guess which story you're talking about because you can't read The Little Girl's Goal or listen to it without crying. I mean, if you do, you have no heart.
Yeah.
That is a very powerful story.
Yeah.
Well, and then also know who you're talking about. And I feel kind of the same way because after the book came out, then they kind of went astray. But that doesn't really change anything because these people all started, most of them with nothing. Now, Conrad Hilton started with everything. I mean, his family was extremely wealthy, and he grew up, having a hotel, running a hotel when he was a child and working in a store. But then he continued to be successful. He went into politics. He came out. He went into business. He went into banking, buying hotels. He had thousands of hotel rooms, and then the Great Depression hit. It hit the hotel industry the hardest.
Yeah.
And so he went from having a lot of money and having everything to having nothing. He had to move his family into a hotel room. He had to borrow money from his friends to take a train to go look at his hotel rooms. So he was desperate, and he was he was on the verge of bankruptcy and losing everything. but he maintained his faith. And that's one of the seven secrets. You've got to believe that no matter what happens, you're still going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that's actually the first secret is you got to get your mind right.
Yeah.
There's going to be stumbling blocks. I
Yeah.
mean, life is full of ups and downs.
Yeah.
If you don't have a problem today, you better be careful, because the universe does not permit vacuums.
Nope.
If you don't have a problem, that's a vacuum. So tomorrow, you better look out.
Yeah.
The longer it's been since you've had one, the harder you're going to be hit. That's just life. I mean, it's the way. So if you're prepared for that, it doesn't surprise you.
Yeah.
It is different.
Well, I will tell you too that the first one there, of course, reminds me of a great line that my dear friend of mine, who has since passed on, loved to quote. Got to get your mind right, Luke, from Cool Hand Luke. But there's also another piece. Well, there are several pieces here, but one in particular that comes to mind also is. And people need to be very cognizant of this, including as they're listening to stories. These individuals who had it all and then lost it all and then got it back again, you can't take it with you anyway. I mean, Steve Martin may have said back in the 70s, they say you can't take it with you. Well, I'm taking it with me. The Egyptian pharaohs, that stuff is still in the tomb and still in the pyramid. They didn't get to take it with them. So on the one hand, if you can't take it with you, then, there are those who have the philosophy as they get older, I'm going to spend it all, let my kids earn what they want. I'm going to just spend it all because it's mine and I can't take it with me. At the same time, I'll leave a little behind for this person and that, and a little philanthropy along the way would be very nice. But it is the third thing that I will mention in this regard before we wrap things up here is everything is temporary. When whether it was Disney or this the gentleman with the hotels, Hilton, it didn't last forever. The Depression didn't last forever. And he actually got, he turned it back around again and started over again. Disney the same way, thought he was going to quit and not have anything more. And guess what? Mickey shows up and he started all over again. So that's the thing that I like to impart to people is it's not permanent. Where you are right now, if you're stuck, if you've got a problem and you're dealing with it and you're really challenged by it, face it head on, but know that it's temporary. That's, I think, a real important factor to remember. And I have to remind myself of that as well when I hit those challenging slots, as if you will. You have two other sections of the book, and we're going to cover it along with the first story in our next installment here, the poetry and the quotes. And I love that. I mean, there are so many quotes that I think of, a lot of humorous ones myself. That my dear friend Doug and I knew him for 53 years, and we loved these different television programs, whether it was MASH or the Bob Newhart Show or a lot of Stan Freberg's satirical humor and so forth. And we would be walking around just quoting them, and it because they were funny and they made us laugh, and we loved to laugh. We just loved to laugh, and I think that's a real key there. Before we wrap this up, I'm going to give you the last word on this first in the many installments of Real Impact.
Well, I would hope that everyone would go to the website, realimpactbook.com. And if you do, I have a gift for you there are no strings attached. If you'll just scroll to the bottom, you'll see a podcast attendees. If you'll click on that, you put in your information and it automatically sends you the ebook, and it's free. You won't be put on any kind of a list. Someone asked me today, well, are you going to, spam me? No, there's nothing. You just get the book. Now, when you get the book, you get the opportunity with a discount. If you want to buy, you can, but that's it. That's what you're going to get. But the ebook is very powerful. The reason I'm giving them away to all your listeners is I appreciate you coming and listening. And I think it's going to help you. And I know that once you read it, you're going to think, what a great gift this would be for a young person. And so I'll sell a bunch of books.
And we certainly hope that's the case because obviously that's how you know that this is part of how you make a living. Yes. But at the same time, I know that's not the primary goal here any more than it is for me with my book. I mean, sales are what they are, but the whole point, and that's one of the reasons why I have never really wanted to monetize my program, the podcast and videocast of Tell Me Your Story. I don't want there to be a barrier. I want people to be able to access the information at any time, that they're able to do so without having to go through that whole rigmarole of putting in all of that information in order to have access. And yeah, sure, I probably might make a few dollars here and there, but yeah, but there are going to be some people that wouldn't have access, and I want the portal to be to freely accessible, and I love the fact that you're making that available. Dennis Henson has been my guest here on Tell Me Your Story. This is the Real Impact series that we are just beginning here on the program. We hope you'll get a copy by going to realimpactbook.com, and we'll have that link up for you to access as well. Dennis, I am looking forward to this series and to our next installment. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Richard. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, the special Real Impact series here where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And let me tell you, he's got a lot of choices in his book. Hope you will join us again. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love Talal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Hey, Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.